Hello, and welcome to the podcast, It's a Matter of Life and Death, a podcast by Annie Anderson and the Energy Medicine Clinic, one where we look to support, align, guide, and empower conversations that are tricky, passionate, and emotional about life and death. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Annie from the Energy Medicine Clinic, joined today by Miranda. How are you, Miranda?
I am good. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm just going to say, before we deep dive into anything too deep, just so everyone has kind of an idea of why we're talking here today, how this all kind of came to be. So I have my business, the Energy Medicine Clinic, and I have a Facebook page and, the social medias and things like that. And I put a call of interest out looking for people who might be interested in joining me on the podcast. And I love the fact that you just jumped in and said, yeah, let's do this. Like, what are you talking about? What sort of topics are you going to be discussing? And when we had just this very brief snippet of what it is that my vision is for this podcast, you were ready to just go because it resonated with you. Am I right? Or am I missing something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Very much.
So I love the fact that we've had, I don't know, maybe 8 minutes of pre-recorded conversation here. And already, I don't know if this podcast is going to go down the route of talking about the death part, but when it's called It's a Matter of Life and Death, it's about more than just one particular thing. And in there's just a few brief minutes that we were talking, I realized how many touch points we have and how interesting it is that when I was asking you how you kind of came to my page to even see the post, it was challenging to even pinpoint where we got to where we are. But here we are. I'm in one city, you're in a completely different city, hundreds of kilometers away. And just in these few minutes of talking with you, we have so many things in common. And how did that work from an energetic perspective of bringing us together so that we would be actually sitting here and doing this? I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I feel like that I have so many examples of that in my life, through my life, and I feel like one thing that I do well consistently is be open to things unfolding in a magical way and not really questioning it. It's just like, oh, this happened. I don't know why it happened. So let's just see where it's going to lead.
Yeah, magical way. That's such a great way to put it. And just so that the people listening can see how amazing this is, you work in the healthcare field in a natural way. You have your Reiki training. You have your EFT training. I work in the healthcare system. I have my Reiki training. I have my EFT training. And we both share this common vision of being able to support people in their growth and their healing, however that works best for them. And here we are.
Yes.
So
it's exciting.
So tell me about what it is that your vision is. Let's see what we can do to find out more about that and put some energy towards that.
Yeah. I think I'll go back and just give a little bit of like why I am where I'm at and who I am. But I think like my whole life from childhood, I've always had this idea that like I wanted to be the adult in someone's life, in a child's life, that I wished I had when I was young. So there's always been this desire to be of service in a way to help people on their journey and through their growth. And I think it was always focused on children throughout my life. And I always, I guess in the back of my mind, had this idea that would have to look like counseling one day. And I would be a counselor and I'd go to school and I'd finish that. And I was on that path. I did my psychology undergrad degree and things like that. And I struggled in the last little while because I went back to do my master's and realized that there's things there that don't necessarily align with where I want to be in the end, and that my energy work and tapping and my own personal life experiences are more what value I have to offer in helping others on their journey.
Right.
And I kind of had a breakdown moment in the last year or two of like, oh, I haven't fulfilled my purpose. I'm supposed to be, in this certain space, offering this certain thing by this time. And I really realized that I have already fulfilled a piece of that purpose in being a mother and
Yes.
being able to offer my children the things that I had envisioned wanting to offer, the world. But I'm like, oh, I've given that to my kids. And so that purpose is fulfilled. And now how do I continue to do that in a way that, I don't know, has more impact or serves more people or fulfills more of what my kids are teenagers and young adults now. So
Yep. A
I'm
little more
going into
longer
a,
lasting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like where do I what's my role now as I move forward, and so the big grand dream has always been like I would love to have a healing center, a home or some land or a space where there's different kind of practitioners that have different expertise and different ways of doing things and modalities that can help people on their journey. And it really is a collective of people that are working together to support each other. And
Well, when you think of
that would
somebody
be,
building a house, they have a saw and a hammer and a screwdriver and a planer and, levels and clamps and all that sort of thing. They don't have necessarily just one tool. And
hmm
so having a variety of tools to approach somebody's healing is very, very beneficial. I support that 100%.
yeah, absolutely. And I think what I learned on my own personal journey and struggles I've gone through in the last 15 years, um, I I was open and dove into any kind of modality and any kind of opportunity that came my way because I was so desperately looking for healing and looking for help to feel better, that I sorry, I just got distracted. There's a coyote right outside my window,
Oh,
sitting right in
interesting.
front
I
of me.
wonder what the symbology of a coyote is
I
right
know. I'm
now.
gonna have to. I'm gonna have to look
Are
that
you
up.
getting your book or am I getting my book?
I don't have the book. I'll have to. You'll have to get your book for me.
Okay, I will go get my
Um.
book because I find that very serendipitous.
Yeah, he's just standing there. It's really cool. Anyway, oh yeah. So what I learned on my journey and what I learned of what I would like to bring to other people in supporting them on theirs is that, you take little bits and pieces of things that work for you and you take them in and you keep them as wisdom and knowledge and things that you can take as a tool along your way. And then not everything's going to be perfect alignment, but it doesn't mean that it's not valuable. So I I'm always open to all things, and I think that I would love to be able to offer people that same kind of thing, because there's people that are healers in my life that haven't healed me necessarily, but they provide a space for healing for me because I do believe we're our own healers.
Absolutely.
Um,
I am a firm
people,
believer of that. Like when you have
yeah.
a wound and you have to go get it stitched up, everyone says, oh, the doctor fixed you. The doctor made it better. Well, the doctor put in stitches. But when the stitches
hmm
come out, who actually knitted the scar and the tissue back together? You did.
Yeah.
Your body did that healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's this perspective shift that I've taken is that, like, oh, like even if I was going to pursue my counseling or however that looks for me, I have a Facebook page too, and I have an idea in my head about what I want to offer. And it's more like holding space for people as they do their own healing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could offer them like a variety of modalities and a variety of tools, I feel like that's powerful because what works for one person
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily the right thing for the next.
Yeah.
So,
And it's important to have
yeah.
that resonate, whatever they choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the one of the things that was the most powerful for you in your own healing journey? Like, does anything stick out as like that was a pivotal moment or that was a pivotal tool?
Um, I don't know if there's any one thing. I think that's why I like the idea of like diverse knowledge
Right.
and diverse opportunities and things like that. I think that the biggest things that have come as a shift in my perspective or a change in my life have been like the hard things. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the catalyst for the work that came after that was the main turning point, like getting like my divorce, or I had a health issue 15 years ago, which set me on the path of like spiritual journey and like a journey through to heal and to like discover more of myself. And it really opened up things. And then my experience of divorce like 8 years ago really also shifted my entire world and my perspective. And so what it did was open the door for me to like look for things and then find what resonates and what doesn't. And it truly is a journey, and it's like a winding path that you take, um, to finding just bits and pieces that you kind of like put yourself back together, or you find deeper healing in different ways as you go through that. So
Yep, I understand
uh
that.
yeah.
So I have the coyote here. I have a book in front of me. It's
Oh.
called The Shamanic Power Animals. And so it's talking here about the coyote being a paradox. They're both wary and curious, stealthy and unseen, sometimes obnoxiously loud and then absolutely quiet. Scary and harmless, nurturing and careless, the coyote wields the power of truth in the form of a paradox. And then the questions that it suggests that somebody might want to consider is, have you struggled with contradicting traits or impulses within yourself? Can you
Huh.
see the strengths in your flaws and the flaws in your strengths? Would you rather be
Mm-hmm.
right or would you rather seek the truth? Are there stories in your life that have completely changed over time?
Mm-hmm.
Warning, the coyote may surprise and even frustrate you when you ask for help or support. However, if you can stay open and keep a keen sense of humor about you, it can be especially potent. Interesting.
Interesting.
Yes.
It is. It is. I think it is reflective of me actually, that I feel like a paradox very often. And even was speaking to my mom this morning about having to walk the this world in like there's a belief system and a way that I feel about the world, and then there's the reality of the world. And like in raising my kids, like how I try to instill in them, like, like listening to their bodies, asking themselves what they need, honoring themselves, honoring the cycles of life and nature and all that stuff. But then also, we still live in this world that has these 9 to 5 demands and these
Yeah.
expectations. And how do you, I struggle, I'm learning how to navigate that, and I'm trying to teach my kiddos how to navigate that. But it is a constant paradox. Like you have one foot in one world and one foot in another.
Are you inside my head
um
right now? Like seriously. I have two boys, 12 and 16, and I was
yeah.
just saying to a friend of mine last week how important it is for me to try and find a way to teach them to listen to their bodies, how to figure
Yeah.
out where their boundaries are, especially when it comes to how they feel. Are they feeling well? Do they have a headache?
Yeah.
Do they have a stomach ache? Especially when they say, you know what, I don't feel like I could go to school today. I don't feel well. And how do you
Yes.
navigate that as a parent when, the traditional sort of train of thought is, well, of course the kids are going to say they're sick. They don't want to go to school. And of course they're trying to pull your leg. They're tricking you. But the truth is maybe they're not. And how invalidating is it if you say to them, well, no, you have to go to school. I don't care that you say that you're feeling nauseous. I don't care that you're having a headache and you just are absolutely exhausted and you didn't sleep well last night. Well, how would that feel if somebody said that to me as an adult? So, how do I
Yeah.
teach them to say, you know what? My body doesn't feel strong or healthy right now. What can I do to make it feel better? Because sending them to
Yeah.
school where they're going to lay their head down on the table and fall asleep isn't going to do anybody any good. Or if they're grumpy and they're, not being very polite with their classmates or their teacher, that's not good. But the truth is, we live in a world where the value of a diploma, a high school diploma, is worth something for a lot of people. And I'm not saying that education isn't important. Clearly, I'm a firm believer of education given how much I've gone through myself. But that paradox of how do you support kids in having a voice as well as trying to get them to learn how to navigate the world that we live in as grown-ups?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's like the biggest struggle I've had. And COVID has really um given an opportunity, shone a spotlight on it, but also like given an opportunity for us to step back and really take stock of that. And I think that our lives and my vision and perspective have changed significantly in the last 3 or 4 years because of the way the world was, like a health concern I had, health concerns my kiddos have gone through, and just all of it. It's like really asking what is truly important, and like that we really start socializing and indoctrinating our kids in a certain way to just push down that feeling. And just if you can just get through the day, you can sleep when you get home. And it's like, what value does that bring
Yeah.
to the time you're spending there, to your life? And um, I spent a lot of time in the last 2 years learning about to like connecting more to the cycles of the moon, and following like indigenous teachings about
Yes.
being really connected to nature and our cycles, and asking myself like, being aware that there's a cycle to the year, even astrologically, that like the end of the year actually happens energetically at the end of March. And I'm like, I always have
Yes.
felt really, really crappy between Christmas and my birthday, which is March 3rd. And I've always been really hard on myself. Like everybody's making, New Year's resolutions, and they're sticking to their weight loss goals and all these things. And I can't get it together. And I just feel depressed. And what's wrong with me? And then when I learned about the energetic cycles of astrology and how that actually works, it's like that's the time of hibernation. And in indigenous teachings, that's the time of going inside and being quiet and allowing yourself rest and all that. And it's like we're not supposed to be charging forward on January 1st. And ever
Yes.
since I learned that, and I have like given myself grace and allowed myself that space, I feel so less judgmental and hard on myself. It's just been such a shift to feel the lightness of accepting that that's actually where I'm supposed to be right now, and that's okay.
Yeah. 100%. You're singing to the choir. How have your kids responded to that? How does your husband, like, are you co-parenting with him, or how does that work?
My ex, so we've been divorced for 8 years. It was a rough, bumpy start, but we're in a better place now. Actually, COVID has helped us come to a more being on more on the same page in certain ways than we
Yep.
were before. So I'm super grateful for that. But we're very different people. So he doesn't really think about these things. And I have the kids. I'm basically, I have the kids most of the time now anyway. So
It's a little
our
easier in
yeah,
that
and
in
our
that
input
aspect.
our input into parenting is very different. So he I'm grateful that he respects my approach to parenting and the way I am with the girls, and he just, kind of lets me take the lead in that way. And it's not that we're on the same page, like let's talk about how we want this to go. It's more like, I'm like, this is how I feel, and I share it with him, and he's like, yeah, sounds good, and lets me run with it. So
That's
my
awesome.
young yeah, my youngest daughter has done 2 years now of homeschooling since COVID has happened, which is, I guess, probably the most um, logistic thing that we've had to be on the same page about. And my reasonings for it are all of these things we're talking about right now.
Yep.
Um, and like, I don't know that he necessarily cares about my reason, but he's like, yeah, that's probably what's best for her. Let's do what feels right. So,
Right.
yeah, but it's been good. My kids are very different too. My little one's very on board and open to these kinds of ideas, and she needs more of that time and ability to be flexible. She knows that she doesn't feel comfortable in the kind of structure that society has set
Yeah.
up.
What a
Whereas my
gift.
oldest,
What a gift to be able
yeah,
to give that to her.
yeah, I feel like that. So I'm very hopeful that she can maintain her um honoring herself
Yeah, I
and
was
who
going to say
she
that
is.
sense of self. Yeah.
Yeah, as she continues to move forward, because she's also very bright and she wants to, do these things in the world that right now are saying, oh, you need to have an education, you need to get a degree for that, you go to university, blah, 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 blah. And I'm same as you. I love education. I'm always learning something. I want my kids to always be learning something, but I think there's multiple pathways forward, and there's going to be more
Yes.
opportunity for that as we continue to walk forward. But yeah, I hope she can reach her goals, but also remain open to that there's multiple ways to get there,
Yeah.
and that's okay if it's not the same as everybody else.
That is one gift that I think that has come out of COVID, in the fact that people had to adjust in order to be able to continue to work, and just having the normalcy now of things like podcasts and Zoom calls and working from home and going to school from home and being more flexible. And you know, just because it's always been a certain way doesn't mean it always has to stay that certain way, and you can change and
Yeah.
adapt. So that's
Yeah.
been very, very good. But your eldest is still in sort of the regular mainstream sort of path?
Um, she just she's just more comfortable there,
Yeah.
so she doesn't question it as much. She doesn't when I talk about, how I see the world and how things need to change, she's more likely to roll her eyes at me. Even though, in there I know she's grateful, um from my perspective. I think in some ways she's just not bought into it, I guess, as much as my youngest, or is not as comfortable with it.
Right.
Um, she's also 18, right? So she went through high school and had those influences through all this time, whereas my youngest has had time away from it and had less of that.
Right.
Also personality wise, like my oldest is very social. She's comfortable. She loves being in those environments, and she gets energy from being around people, whereas my other one is more introverted. And so it's easier for her to be like, I'm going to step back from those spaces because I need to. Um, it feels more like honoring herself, whereas
Yeah.
my oldest is more like, oh, I'm missing out on something. And, they have different pathways forward too. It's interesting as a parent to realize how different your kids can be, even though you're doing the same thing.
I remember when I was a kid and my parents would make decisions based on what was best for my sister and I individually. And when I got the decision in the way that I thought was, favorable to me, I wholeheartedly thought that was a great way to make decisions. But when the decisions
Hmm.
were made that I thought were maybe not quite as fair, because I didn't get the same slice or same size of slice of whatever the opportunity was, I resisted it. But now, as an adult looking back and as a parent, I can see the value of that individual parenting based on the child. 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I remember when my oldest was like 3, I remember saying like, or not saying, but thinking in my head like, I am just killing this parenting thing. Like, I'm meant for this. My kid, look at her, she's amazing, which she is. But then like my second one was born and she was completely different from day one.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that has not as much to do with me as it has to do with her. So, really had to learn like how to navigate, yeah, parenting two completely different kids and what's good for one. Like the COVID thing, when we were talking about going back to school after they had the break, I was like, what would be great for one, like keeping my youngest home. If I had just made that decision for both of them, it would have killed my oldest.
Right.
But forcing them both to go back would have been super detrimental to my youngest.
Yeah.
So,
How
yeah.
lovely that you could just do what you needed to do and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, grateful for the opportunity for
Yeah.
that, for sure.
Yeah. Now, tell me a little bit more about this other course that you've developed that you're kind of working on with plants and nature. What is that all about?
So,
How does that work?
yeah, how did that? I think I went to see a medium a couple years ago. I was in a bad place and I was feeling like I needed some hope, which that encounter gave me. And in that conversation with her, she said something about rosemary, the herb,
Right.
and said, rosemary, something's coming up about rosemary. Rosemary is about remembering and whatever. So it just opened up my awareness to like, oh, do plants have messages for us, or is there a reason? Like, why would rosemary come up for me? And so I went and kind of investigated it. I went and bought some. I had it in my shower. I smelled it every day while I was having a shower in the morning, and I really connected to it. And while I was in the shower one day, this whole kind of vision of like plant being um, a pathway to your medicine, to your healing. just came to me. I wrote it all out on the shower door, got out, wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then um, invited a friend over to like partake in this vision that I had. And it was just basically that what I came up with was multiple things. Um, at the end of my degree, my psych degree a few years ago, I was finishing my psych degree. I took a lot of Indigenous psychology classes.
Right?
So I have a lot of connection to Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and it just resonates with me so much. So I'm very, I was very excited about how this kind of all came about, and like what does medicine even mean? And there's like what we've come to think of medicine as being is very like medication and very Western minded, but medicine is like deeper. There's traditional medicine, and I'm thinking about like my ancestors who, I think they're Celtic roots, and like where did my ancestors come from, and why am I drawn to this and called to this recently? And I think it's because there's people in my lineage somewhere that use plant medicine and use traditional medicine in their healing and in their path. It's just calling me. So the kind of idea I have and what I'm going to like offer people to come and participate in a couple weeks is the idea that like how do we reclaim that idea of what medicine is, and that medicine can be anything. And some
Yes.
people medicine is exercise, or it's nature, or it's singing or dancing or meditation or whatever that looks like for you, and that changes over time and based on your needs. And so in this kind of time of connection, it would be about connecting to your higher self and asking in this time at this moment, what do I need, what medicine do I need, and then using plants, herbs, things like that, as a way of connecting, and using that to like guide you
Right.
to whatever it is you need. So an example, like I did it with my friend, and my kiddos came home, and they're like, "What is this?" I had plants all over the, couch and table and stuff, and so we just did like a little meditation, and just was like asking yourself like, what do I need right now, and how do I use it? So my youngest daughter embraced it, and she, smelled the herbs, touched the herbs, played with them, and she made a little bundle for herself, and she put it in a little sachet, and she
Mm.
decided that she needed to carry that around with her. And one of the main herbs that she loved, she's asking what it was thyme.
Mm-hmm.
And so after she had made her bundle, we looked up like what is the spiritual meaning of thyme, what is like the plant medicine of thyme represent, and it was about sadness. And she had been just so sad for weeks prior to that.
Aw.
She was just sad and she didn't know why. Yeah. So when we read that, it just resonated deeply with her. And she's like, oh, this is, I'm going to take this to school with me. And she used it as a touchstone, and she just carried it with her for a little while. And
That's
it
lovely.
was kind of, yeah, it was really, really cool. So I just want to provide an opportunity for people who might have not thought of these things or explored these things to have time to connect with themselves, and then use plants as a way to um, just guide them, or send a message or bring a message or hold some kind of
Meaning or
space or
growth or healing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, for them.
lovely.
And yeah, and that maybe it turns into, there's other, what are the other types of medicine, and you do movement, or you do singing, or you do sound, or whatever that looks like. But
Or you
right
sit and
now the
cuddle a puppy. That could be medicinal.
yeah, 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 anything. Yeah. Just opening up the conversation of like thinking about what medicine is, and what that means to you, and that we all have access to it all the time. We just have to like take the time to sit and ask the question, and then listen for the answer, and then follow that guidance when it comes.
Well, isn't that an interesting concept? I don't know how many people that I talk to, and I say the same thing. I said, listen, go inside, connect, get the answer, and then what happens is they get an answer they don't like because it's
Yeah.
hard, or it's going to
Yeah.
require change or sacrifice, or it's vulnerable, or whatever their consideration is. And I just think, how would it be to make things easier to embrace those new ways that would bring change, that would bring healing, so that people embrace it more? That's one of the reasons why I want to have this podcast, is because I want people to be able to have discussions about things that are difficult or tricky, whether it's, life affirming, or it's around death, or it's around something they're really passionate about, so that people can be more authentic with who they are, where they want to go. And it's always fascinating to me when somebody shares something that is vulnerable and real and important to them, just how many other people, if nothing else, connect with that authenticity and then feel the bravery to be more authentic in their own lives.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that is kind of at the core of who I think I who I feel like I am. Like I feel like authenticity is so important, and sometimes that might come across from me as like, oh, you know, she's she's always focused on struggles or whatever. If somebody wants to have a cheery disposition all the time, that's I'm not the person.
Yeah.
Like I can't be disingenuine. Like if I'm struggling, I'm struggling. Like my personal Facebook, page is not about complaining, but it's always about like this is where I'm at.
This is
Like this is
real.
where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I do that is because I know I'm not alone. Or maybe sometimes it's because I do feel alone. And so I'm sharing because I don't want anybody else to feel alone if that's how they are also feeling, because life is not easy.
Not always.
And no, and pretending that things, there's always like the heart, like I said, from the hardest things of my life have come the greatest opportunities. And um yeah, just the greatest opportunities for growth. I'm super grateful now in hindsight that they've happened because I know where I'm at. But when you're in it,
Oof.
like
It can be
it's
tough.
yeah, yeah, it can be. So I just don't feel like we should pretend that it's not hard, because there's other people that you're comparing yourself to people's something you don't know that's going on inside. So you feel like, oh, am I not good enough, or am I not whatever, because I'm struggling and everyone else seems to feel like they're just floating through life. And that's just not the reality of it.
Well, I often think back to that picture that I've seen circulating on social media, and it's an apple looking at itself in a mirror. And as you
Mm-hmm.
look at the mirror, the apple looks perfect. But from behind, that isn't visible in the mirror, there's a big bite out of the apple.
Yeah.
And it's just,
Yeah.
that's not authentic. To only show
No.
the shiny side, that's not real.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like I remember when I was going through my divorce, and a friend was as well. And I remember her saying, like, you know, she only cries in the bathroom and never lets her kids see her, and how much she's struggling. And I just felt like, well, on one hand, like you're a human being with human emotions, and your kids are allowed to know that. Like you're not supposed to be perfect. And like what that sometimes even could send the message of is that when your daughter hits a bumpy patch in life and she's struggling, and she looks back at that time and she says, well, mom never cried. Like look what she was going through,
Yes.
and she never cried, and she just breezed through it so easily, and something must be wrong with me that I'm struggling this much. I'm like, it's a gift to your kids. Like you don't put the weight of that on them, but
No.
it is a gift to your kids to let them see, like, I'm a human being, we all have struggles, and look at how I'm navigating it. Yeah, I cry sometimes, but like I've gone back to school, and look how I'm empowering myself. And it's not all good or all bad, but if we're authentic and open and honest about it, I think it supports our movement forward, but it also helps other people when they're find themselves in those spaces. They can be more inspired by someone's authenticity than someone's like, you know, plan or program of how you're supposed to be perfect and get
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think people are more willing to support other people that are feeling the fear and doing it anyways and being authentic. And that's where
Yeah.
that I think those real ties of community come in where this is important to you and I can see that it's genuinely important to you. How can I help you? Because I
Yes.
think people, most people genuinely want to help the people in their lives succeed. And if there's a way to do that when somebody's actually willing to put their heart on their sleeve and say, this is really important to me for whatever reason, I think people would be more willing to support that. And then how is there anything that comes out of that other than good? And then it's,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow, very interesting. I'll be very interested to follow and see how your plant journey goes because a lot of what you say really rings true. I don't know a lot about it. I'll be honest. I don't know a lot about it, but I feel the passion in you and there's something to it. I think it's great.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know a lot about it. It's like it's it's a it's a journey, and I'm hopeful. A big struggle I have is like not being worthy enough or good enough or
Mm,
prepared enough or educated enough to start sharing what I feel like I have to share inside of me.
right.
And so it's always be, been a block. And so with this, I'm just like, I don't know, it's calling me. It feels nice. It feels good. So I hope that people are open to exploring it with me as it
Yes.
unfolds, right? Like I don't know what it means, where it goes, what it looks like, but I know that there's wisdom in there, or there's some kind of learning or teachings in there that people can draw out. And it comes back to that idea that like no one is really our healer. It all comes from within. So it's what I'm hoping to offer is like an opportunity for people to have even a moment of that connection to themselves, and a moment of, you don't need to go see a medium to tell you to get rosemary and that might serve you in some way. Like you can do that all on your own if you just take some space and time to connect. So
Well, I love the symbology of it coming to you in the shower. Like that
yeah.
time to have that water meditation or that 5 minutes or 20 minutes or however long it takes for you to be able to just stand there in the shower and be present. And when those sorts of visions come, I think that's I think that's great. I love the fact that you wrote on the door of the shower. That's awesome.
I feel like I get all my best ideas in the shower, and it's probably because it's the place I have the least amount of distractions. That's like I
Yes.
have to be here, and like yeah, you can check out from the world and just be with yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Hmm. If you had any final words of wisdom for people, given everything we've gone through in the last couple of years and what your own journey has been, what what sort of message would you have that would give permission to somebody else to step into their power or take that risk to be themselves or follow their passions? Is there anything that sticks out that would be, worth sharing to somebody else? Because I think you've probably got a lot more wisdom in there than you give yourself credit for.
Oh, I feel like there's so many different threads that I could pull at that I've learned about myself and in my life. Um, but I think the overarching thing and where I'm at right now that I keep coming back to is that like all of all of who we are and all of the power that we have in our lives, it all comes from within us. Like we are truly way more powerful than we've ever been taught or been allowed to believe that we are. And that like in connecting to ourselves and spending time with ourselves and pouring into ourselves and listening to like that voice that's inside of us, and then allowing ourselves to walk on the path that leads us, um that's where our power is, and that we don't have to give over our power to external forces or live up to some standards that society or the people we love, even the people around us, have set for us. That like we really we really just are more powerful than we believe. And when we start aligning with that and listening to those things, like I think not only our own lives open up and unfold in abundant ways, like that's how we change the world.
Is there any sort of advice on how to get to the point of actual courage? Because it can be scary stepping into that.
I can't. I think that it's like I said to my daughter recently, and I probably speak to myself as much as I do to them when I'm speaking to them. It's I hugely about like feeling uncomfortable and doing it anyway, and that
Yeah.
that is that balance of like, knowing who you are and honoring where you're at, and really giving yourself an opportunity to do what feels good for your body and your soul and your spirit. But sometimes our old programming, our subconscious beliefs about things and our patterns of ways of being, they can interfere in that flow and in that unfolding. So we sometimes have to be uncomfortable and do it anyway. There's a difference between being misaligned, doing things that don't feel aligned with you, who you are, um, and then also like doing this thing that feels aligned, but I'm scared to step into the next thing.
Yes.
I'm scared because I have all these doubts and fears. But like in when you're feeling that, like feeling it and then doing it anyways, because often we'll find that when we look back, it's like, oh, that's where the greatest amount of growth happened. That's when I made the biggest step forward in
Yes.
my life when I did that. But I think alignment is
The key.
is still important. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing as I listen to you, thinking, you know what, you're lined up, everything's, in the right track, and then it's just a matter of making the push. And you'll go far.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today. Perhaps we'll have an opportunity again to meet up and touch base and see how things go with your program, because I think your vision is lovely, and we need more of it in this world. We do.
Oh,
Things need
well,
to
thank you
change,
for
and
the
it's
opportunity.
people like you that are out there doing the things. Hashtag all the things. I I think it's great.
That it's so funny you said that, because when you put the thing about the podcast on your Facebook page, I was like, that's what I've been called to be doing right now, and so I'm always thinking like, well, what would I call it? What would be the theme? How would I do a podcast? And I told my girls last night, I'm like, I think I would just call it all the things.
Yes. Well, when you're talking about magic and things coming together, maybe that's like the universal sign that now is the time to do it.
Yeah, tons of signs today talking to you. I'm very grateful that we connected.
I am also. And thank you to everyone who joined us today to listen to what we were talking about. And if I have any words of encouragement, I would say do the things, feel the fear, do it anyways, be in alignment. I totally resonate with what you're saying, Miranda. Appreciate it very, very much. And we will talk soon, I am sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.